my name is Saj Rai. I'm going to be a trainer. Currently, I'm working as a CTO in a company here in New Delhi, and I have over 15 years of total experience. I've been training. I've been associated with Simplilearn as a CISSP trainer for around 2.5 years now. And apart from CISSP, I have a dozen odd certifications, including PMP, Prince2, etc. Now let's do a quick introduction for CISSP. And so CISSP. So I know most of you know why you are here, and you understand that CISSP is one of the most sought after certification in the field of information security. And the best thing I like about CISSP is the fact that it's a vendor neutral certification. Okay, so and it covers a lot of best practices in the industry. So this is governed by the IC2, the certification program, and it's based on the CBK, which is again maintained by the IC2. So IC2, this is a very long name. It stands for your International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium. So it's a really long name, but in short we call it IC2, and this is a non-profit organization based out of New York. And they started off the CISSP exam in the late 1980s because at that point of time there was a need to have a standard for security within the industry. So that's some time back. So it's come a long way now, 25 years now. And there are 8 domains that we're going to talk about for CISSP. So the domains are your security and risk management, asset security, security engineering, communications and network security. This is very similar to your CCNA course. Identity and access management, security assessment and testing, security operations, and the final 8th domain is the software development security. Okay, so this is a new syllabus which was introduced from April 15, 2015, last year. So prior to that, there were 10 domains, and very similar 10 domains. So the changes, what they've done is they have just restructured the knowledge. So and what they have also done is they've added about 5 to 10% new concepts, new syllabus, and not much, but just a few. Okay, so what it also means is that if you have the old book with the old syllabus, that's still going to be useful. Okay, so there's no need to throw that away. It's still going to be useful. Like I said, 90%, 90 to 95% material is the same. So the new book, the new syllabus. So what it's only done is it's kind of reconfigured the whole thing, and they've merged certain domains, which I will let you know throughout the course. I'll let you know this was from the previous syllabus, and that you can make a mental note of that. All right. So today we will begin with. After this, we'll begin with the security and the risk management. So the benefits. Yeah. So I know most of you know what the benefits are. The CISSP is a career differentiator, and like some of you mentioned, this is what you want to have on your resume, right? To enhance your credibility and your marketability, right? So today there's a lot of demand for a CISSP or similar certified professional, and I don't think there are enough supply. The demand and the supply, I don't think it kind of matches. All right, so this somebody with a CISSP ensures that there is a working knowledge of information security, right? And especially in the US, I think it's a regulatory requirement to be, if you're working in the government, you need to be either CISSP or some equivalent, a certified professional. And the market survey tells that CISSP professionals earn 25% more than their non-certified counterparts. So what are the benefits for the employers who hire a CISSP? All right, so as the employer, if I hire a CISSP, then I know that this person brings in that knowledge, that experience, and also the credibility, right? So this person will have certain ethical standards as well, which we'll talk about a little more in detail later on. And I know that the CSSP has that, understands the industry's best practices, understands the language, and can really bring in the best practices into the organization. Okay, so what are the requirements to become a CISSP? So the experience is important, right? So you need to have 5 years of direct full-time experience working in 2 or more of the 8 domains. That is important. If not, then you can still do it 4 years of direct full-time experience. However, you need to be, you need to have a 4-year college degree or an additional credential from the CISSP approved list. So if you fall into this category, you can probably look at that list. In case of no experience, then what you can do is you can become an associate of CISSP. So you cannot call yourself CISSP. You can call yourself an associate of CISSP, which demonstrate that you have the knowledge. However, you may not have had the 5 years of experience that is mandated. That is mandated by CISSP. Okay, so in this case, you have 6 years to earn the required experience to become a CISSP. Okay. That's the requirement part. That's the first thing. All right. So how to take the exam? So you need to register, and this is the link here. You can find it out in the CISSP official website as well. So the link is to the pearsonview.com website, and you'll need to create a new username, user account, and search for the Pearson VUE Testing Center in your location. And schedule the exam and pass the exam. Okay. Just a caution. Just a caution here is that the CISSP exam is held at not any Pearson VUE testing center, but just a few approved testing centers, and those are few in your location. So, for example, in New Delhi, there is just one, and probably one in Gurgaon. In Bangalore, there might be 2. In New York, around 3. Okay, so very few. There could be lots of Pearson VUE testing centers, but the ones approved for CISSP is very few, which means that you have a very limited options to select from. So I would suggest that if just go to the CISSP website, register yourself, and take a look at the testing centers available to your location. Okay, so there may be a few, and accordingly you may get an idea as to what is the available slots. And usually you may not find it before a month. Yeah, so you'll have to kind of keep checking. Okay, so you don't have to schedule the exam. You can just look at the slots and plan accordingly. Okay, so what else? What else do we need to do to get the certification? So first is to take the exam, pass the exam. The second is you need to subscribe to the CISSP Code of Ethics. And we will discuss about this because this is part of the syllabus. Okay, so this is the second thing that you need to do. And the third is you need to get your form endorsed by a CISSP certified professional who is also an active member. Okay, so this person will attest to your professional experience, whatever you've mentioned in the form. Okay, so both of these activities, the subscription to the CISSP Code of Ethics and the endorsement form, okay, these are not very difficult. So you can obviously, the CISSP Code of Ethics, you just have to say I agree. Obviously, you need to understand that and say I agree to that. And the endorsement form. Suppose you do not know anybody who is an CISSP certified professional, also an active member, then in that case you can just tell CISSP, I'm sorry, I do not know anybody, and CISSP can act as an endorser. Okay, so So it's not so difficult. So you just have to tell them, please, endorse me, and they will do the rest. All right. So no showstopper here. So if you know somebody, get it done. If no, then just let CISSP know about that. Okay. So getting the certificate is one part. You will also have to maintain the certificate. So the recertification is required every 3 years. So in this 3 years, you need to earn something called a CPE, which stands for Continuing Professional Education. So very similar to what you might have for PDUs, for PMPs. Okay. So this CP is absolutely important, and you need to earn 120 CP credits in those 3 years. And you need to have 40 CPs every year, minimum 40 CPs every year. Apart from earning the CPs, you also need to pay a maintenance fee of $85 per year. Okay, so the CPs are not very difficult to earn. There are many activities one can do, right? So there's a long list which you can find on the CISSP website. Okay, so for example, watching a webinar for 1 hour, that's one CP, and things like that. Okay, so you also have to be careful. Whatever information that you provide in the form has to be absolutely correct. You need to provide your supervisor's name and contact details, and CISSP on their part will audit this forms randomly. So if you are selected to be audited, and if they find your information incorrect, then it may cause an issue for you. So you need to ensure that whatever information that you provide is absolutely correct. Okay, the examination format. Now there are 250 questions. Okay, so you need to answer 250 questions, but out of which only 225 questions are graded, which are actually graded. And while the rest 25 questions are only used for research purpose. Okay, so these are some of the questions which they want to test out, some psychometric questions, and they will not be graded, these 25 questions. But the fun part is you have no idea which these 25 questions are. So you'll have to attempt all the 250 questions. Okay, so earlier on we used to have MCQs. Beginning 2014, they've introduced the drag and drop and the hotspot questions as well. So I will show you examples of how it looks like. The exam duration, it's really long. One of the longest exam I've personally taken, it's 6 long hours. Well, and I'll talk about this a little later on more in detail. The passing grade, again, this 225 questions which are graded are based on the difficulty level of the question. So some of the questions may be graded a little higher than the other one. Okay, and a person needs to score at least 700 out of a possible 1,000 points. That's a passing grade. So if you pass, they will not tell you. So they'll just tell you, okay, congratulations, you passed. But if you have failed, then they'll let you know your score was 652 or whatever that score is. All right, so I would assume that most of you will be giving a computer-based test and instead of a paper-based. And so as soon as you complete your exam, you should be able to find out whether you passed or failed. The results will be announced immediately. The examination fee, it's $599 for both the paper-based and the computer-based tests. And most of you, I would assume, would be taking the CBT. Paper-based is only allowed if there is no approved testing center within the 35-mile radius. Okay, so that's the introduction, and so the next domain will begin the security and the risk management. Okay, so we're going to begin with domain 1, security and risk management. So this has got about 168 slides. We will begin today, and most probably we'll finish by tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to talk about the importance of information security management. We'll discuss about policies, procedures, standards, etc. We will understand information risk management. We will also talk about computer crime. Now, this used to be part of the law and regulations domain from the earlier syllabus, and also we will talk about the BCP. What does BCP stand for? Anybody? BCP?
Business Continuity Program.
Yes, Business Continuity Planning. So yes, yeah. So we will. So this used to be part of another domain earlier on, DRBC. So BCP is which we'll study in domain 1, and DR will study in domain 7. So that's how they've all moved around the syllabus, right? So they haven't really removed anything. They just added 5 to 10% of new material. Okay, so let's begin with the case study. Let me read out the case study. It says importance of information security and risk management. Kevin Butler is a security administrator in the Network Firewalls division at Nutri Worldwide Incorporated. He has to prepare for CISSP exam. He starts his preparation by reading a historical case of a competitor of Nutri Worldwide Inc. The competitor company had failed to understand the importance of information security. The company had planned their business continuity plan without continuous involvement of IT. IT security inputs were taken without the team playing an active role. The BCP was weak in the areas of IT security. When the headquarters of the company was hit by a tornado, there was a huge information leak as data protection measures at the time of the natural disaster were not well planned. The IT tried their best to prevent this. The company had to face losses, which led them to file for bankruptcy within a few years. So that is Kevin Butler's story. Okay, so now let's get into the concept of CIA. So CIA as the pillars of your security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So as we discuss more about security, you will realize that this is everything that we discuss is related to the CIA of the information. So let's begin. Okay, what is confidentiality? Who can explain confidentiality?
Confidentiality can be defined as keeping the information available to the people who it is supposed to be. It should be only accessible by the people or the parties who are authorized to access it.
Okay. All right. So that is correct. So only the authorized person or only authorized party should have access to that information, right? So that is confidentiality. Absolutely correct. So what is integrity?
Data should be protected from unauthorized access or unintended or accidental changes.
Correct.
So
correct.
Integrity is ensuring that the data is not modified by an unauthorized person, and usually is used during transit of information.
Okay. All right. Yes. So you're right. So integrity is about the protection of information from intentional, unauthorized, or accidental changes. So here we want to ensure that only the authorized people or the person should be able to make those changes. So later on, we'll also discuss there are 3 goals of integrity. Okay. So I'll come back to this one more time. And availability.
Information should be available or accessible when required.
Right. So yes, the information should be available and accessible to users when they need it. So that is availability. Correct. So there could be lots of issues with availability. So we'll discuss this later on. One of the important things to discuss is IT governance. So many companies have this IT governance structure, and let's understand what their responsibilities are. So information security governance is the set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board and executive management with the goal of providing strategic direction, ensuring that objectives are achieved, ascertaining that risks are managed appropriately, and verifying that the enterprise's resources are used responsibly. Okay, so it's a really long definition here, so let's break this down. So if I break this down, there are four things that's coming out very clearly from this statement. So first of all is that the information security activities are being performed appropriately. Okay, that's the first thing. Second is they want to ensure that the risks are mitigated to an acceptable level. And the third is there is enough investment for information security. And the fourth is that there is measurements and there is ROIs to ensure that to verify the effectiveness of the IT security programs. So some of these are some of the goals of the IT governance. Okay, so it's also very important to understand this definitions, which is a mission. So you must have read through on the website, or if you're a part of a company, they will tell you, "Oh, this is our mission. These are your goals. These are your vision." Right? So what is a mission? So mission, it's a statement of the company's its ongoing purpose and reason for existence. Right? So this mission, it usually guides the actions of the company. It explains its overall goal. It provides a path to the goal, and also it really helps the management in decision making. Right, so that's a mission. It's a very broad statement. It's not very detailed. It's got a very broad statement. Okay, let me ask you: do you know what the mission statement at Microsoft is? So let me read it out to you. It's very interesting. So the mission statement of Microsoft reads like, at Microsoft, our mission is to enable people and business throughout the world to realize their full potential. Wow, that's their mission. Okay, to enable people and business to realize their full potential. So nowhere have they talked about creating operating systems or creating Office 365. That's not a mission. That's not the mission. Okay, so you understand where I'm coming from. The mission is a very long, broad statement about the existence. Why did the company exist in the first place? So the next question is, there's another one which I want to kind of read out. This is for the ISC square. The ISC square. So it says, support and provide members and constituents with credentials, resources, and leadership to secure information and deliver value to society. Right. So that is the mission statement of ISC square. And nowhere do they mention that we will conduct the CISSP exam and things like that. That's not really the mission. And the next question is, so this is a mission statement. So how are you going to achieve your mission statement? How are you going to achieve whatever you want to say? How will Microsoft enable people and business throughout the world to realize their full potential? So to answer that question, then you would probably break that into goals. Okay, we will do this exactly. And the next thing is, how do I achieve that goal? The goal probably is to release. Your goal is probably release Windows whatever by this particular date. That's the goal. So how are you going to do that? So you're going to break that goals further into objectives, right? So you have to understand that the mission, goals, and objectives all need to be aligned together. Okay. And whenever you do, it's very important. Whenever you do your information security activity, one of the very important things that you need to ensure is that you have the senior management support. And at the end of the day, it's the senior management who provides you with the resources. Okay, so please ensure that the senior management support is there to begin with. Okay, here's a business scenario, and I would like to request somebody to read this. And let's see who's here. Alan, may I request you to read this and answer the question?
Yeah. Kevin has understood the importance of mission goals and objectives of organization and the importance of aligning its security to it. He read this statement on the company website. Nutria Worldwide Incorporated will pursue and foster opportunities for growth and enrichment for its employees and stakeholders, with the customer being the focal point. Is this a statement, the mission, goal, or objective of the statement? I think it's a goal.
You think it's a goal. Why do you think it's a goal?
This is something that they're trying to strive for, but my mind is also saying it's a mission because it's very broad.
Okay. Well, you've got to select one. I'm so sorry, CISSP only allows you one.
I think it's a goal because they're trying to achieve a mission.
Okay. All right. Usually goals have certain time frames.
I see. So it has to be a mission then because it's very broad.
And also, if you see here, it says, okay. Okay, no, that's another one. Okay, so yes, you're right. This is a mission statement. It's a very broad statement, and really it's not very specific, right? It's not specific. So thank you, Alan. And okay, so this is interesting. So this is about certain organization processes that happens that as a security person you need to be aware of. So one is the acquisitions, this or mergers. Okay, so this is where different organizations combine for many reasons, whereas some of the mergers they're friendly, where both parties can gain from the merger, while others can be hostile, right? So in either situations there could be certain security risks. So let's quickly discuss, what do you think are so put on a security practitioner's hat, and let's figure out what are some of the security challenges that you might face if there's an acquisition happening.
So one challenge that I can think of is the companies have to share information with each other. So their levels of access and the confidentiality, so whom should be given access to which information. So all these things will need to be kind of clear. Then they need to this finally gets into the employees accessing each other data and network accesses and all these things, and the companies might have different levels of security, different ways they actually protect their information. So these are probably the things that the challenges that comes up when two companies or one company acquires the other.
All right. Thank you. May I know who's this right now?
Hey, this was Naga.
Naga. Okay, thank you, Naga. So it takes time for me to kind of relate the voice to the name.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned.
That's okay. Okay, and let's hear from somebody else.
Hi, this is Pratibha. I think from my past experience during mergers and acquisitions or even divestitutions, right, the primary issues when they come around, either technical integration or technical separation, you have to think about physical security, technical aspect of security, and then obviously BR, DCP plannings are different. So disaster recovery scenarios, they need to be evaluated when there are initial discussions around this, and policies and technology processes and policies, just not technology, rather everything as the two participant nations, like legal, financial, everything. So policies and procedures. So all these aspects, there are issues.
Absolutely correct. Yes. So you need to look at all technical, physical, and administrative controls. Yes. Okay. Thank you, guys. I think yes, those are some good points that you brought up. And then you also have opposite of an acquisition, which is a divestiture or a spin-off, where you have a company which is being maybe being liquidated. Right, so these are again very difficult times for the organization, and there are people who are losing their jobs, who are being laid off. So again, the security practitioner has a big challenge in protecting the information. And so moving forward, so auditing is one of the way to ensure there is compliance, and we will talk about this about in detail later on. And so we can use some of the existing frameworks. For example, COBIT is very popular. COBIT, it stands for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. So this is from ISACA, and it has this frameworks. It has the one thing I like about COBIT is that it has taken all of the best parts from all of the different already existing frameworks. It has taken from ITIL, your TOGAF, your ISO standards, everything. So it's kind of just brought in best of everything. Right. So these are some of the frameworks that you can already use. We'll talk about this, again in domain 3.
This is Srikant here. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, Srikant.
I have a question. During the acquisition, people would be a concern?
Absolutely.
Okay, maybe the people who is handling the high senior positions?
I think yes. Why not? So it all depends on, yes, everybody's a risk. So in terms of, I think the major risks are in your data loss, data leakage, and things like that, right? So you need to there's a lot of things that you need to cover. There's a lot of things to cover. So there might be people who might be fired. There might be people who will be joining you. So the people in different companies, they may have different policies. Yes, so people is a major concern.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a very important concept that of due care and due diligence. Okay, let's understand what it is. Anybody wants to explain what due diligence, due care is? It's a very standard concepts.
I think this is Balaji again. I think due diligence is kind of making the proper analysis how you are going to do it. When you want to do that, those kind of questions may be answered through due diligence.
And due care?
Due care is, how you are going to take care of your goal part of the security.
Okay, so let's talk about due diligence. Okay, so due diligence, this means that the company has really done their investigation to figure out what the possible weaknesses and vulnerabilities are. Okay, so it could include things like doing a background checks of the employees. It could be background checks of employees, could many things like credit checks of your business partners, doing your information security assessments, penetration testing of firewalls, and blah blah blah. So lots of things that you can do, right? So the result, what is the end result of a due diligence activity?
Risk identification.
Right. So it's risk identification, and more importantly, you get some data, right? What you get at the end of the day doing due diligence is some data. And the question is, what are you going to do about that data? Your data tells you that, listen, your firewall is not configured properly, or your data tells you that the employees' background check that you've done, they are not fit to be taken into the organization. So what are you going to do? And that is answered by your due care activity. So due care activity is where you, having known what the risks are, you will do some reasonable, take some action to mitigate those risks. Okay, so this is the action that as a reasonable or a prudent person would exercise under that condition, right? So the important term here to understand is a prudent, P-R-U-D-E-N-T. Just make note. Okay, so this is related to due care. Okay, so due care is absolutely important, and it is often considered negligence, and in many countries it is actionable under law. So if you don't show your due care, you may be penalized. All right. So if I were to sum it up, so due diligence is the process of data gathering so that proper due care or the prudent actions can take place. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me just share Just hold on. Just let me share this. Okay, I'm sharing my whiteboard. Let me know if you're able to see this. You have something called a PDCA cycle. What does PDCA stand for?
Plan, do, check, act.
Plan, do. It's also what's his other name? What's also known as?
Deming cycle.
Right. So, what do you think in this cases are your due diligence activities?
And check or due diligence activities.
Do and check.
No, plan and check.
Plan and check. Okay. Is your due diligence activity? What about the due care?
Do and act, because they are action oriented.
Action oriented. Those are your due care activities. Okay. All right. So in security, we're going to talk about 3 controls. This is absolutely important to understand. So there are 3 different controls. One is the administrative, a technical, and a physical. Okay. So administrative relates to all those activities which were like, for example, you may do background checks of the employees, the due diligence, all those activities that you might want to do. You might prepare some policies or standards, or you might have people training on all those things. So that's part of your administrative controls. And technical, this is like the word says, technical, logical controls, also known as logical controls. This is where you will have technical controls like your firewalls, your access controls, access control list, okay, encryption. So those all comes under your technical security controls. And for physical, it is the physical controls like your perimeter, walls, gates, doors, security guards, CCTV, etc. This all comes under physical controls, physical security controls. Now, people often ask me, we are IT people, and why do I have to, even study about HR policies, or why do I have to study about your guards and physical security? I mean, shouldn't it be done by an admin person or a HR person? That's not. I'm a technical person. I'm focused on technical security. So that is a question that I often get asked, and it's important to understand that when you talk about security, a holistic security approach, it has to be all of these 3 controls. Okay, it has to be administrative control, technical, and physical. Okay, so for example, if you had a wonderful administrative controls, you had the best firewalls to protect your system for technical security, but if somebody was able to just walk into your data center and go away with and take your hardware with them, so that effectively gives you 0 security, right? So you have to ensure that all the 3 controls are being met. Here's a concept about SLAs, and SLA is usually a formal agreement between the service provider and the organization, right? So there might be certain things in SLA which I will talk about later on. Okay, so we'll come back to this again. And you will also have, you might also look into outsourcing. Okay, so outsourcing makes a lot of business sense to many people, and so many organizations are actually outsourcing their part of the business, okay, which is not really their core competency, so that they can reduce costs, they can focus on what they do best, right? So for example, if an organization wants to do digital marketing, okay, so digital marketing is a very specific skill very specific skill. So if I want to do a digital marketing, or maybe to build an app, okay, so there are 2 options I have. Either I hire people who can do digital marketing, or can develop an app. That's one option to go. The other option is I go to an expert, a professional who can do that for me. And in that case, I outsource that work to that person or that organization. All right, so it makes sense because because app development may not be my core strength. I just want to focus on my core strength, right? So that is outsourcing. So it makes a lot of business sense. However, there are risks associated with that. So the risks could involve things like your loss of control of confidential information, or accountability. Compliance is another issue. We'll discuss this in a little more detail. So how do you ensure that these risks associated with outsourcing are mitigated? So you can look at things like on-site assessment, understand the document, have a document exchange and review, sign your NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, your non-compete agreements, etc., and have a policy and process review. So these are some of the things that you can do to protect yourself, your organization. All right. So, for example, outsourcing is, I mean, it's a really big thing. So, in today's world, even security is being outsourced, right? So the firewalls in the Punjab National Bank it's managed by Wipro or probably Infosys. I'm not too sure which, but either one of these two. I think it's Wipro is managing the firewalls for them, right? So that's how it is. Offshoring is outsourcing to another country. All right, so it's also outsourcing, but to another country. Again, it's the major concern with offshoring is your privacy and compliance, right? So for example, if there is a company in the U.S. which is into the medical industry, say the medical industry in the U.S. they are governed by the HIPAA. Okay, HIPAA law. So HIPAA stands for your Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. We'll talk about this HIPAA later on in a little more detail. But basically, what HIPAA talks about is protecting the patient's health information, and there are certain controls to that. So a U.S. company offshoring that work to a company in India. So that's a problem because in India we don't have such HIPAA, or similar laws, right? So how can you ensure that the Indian company follow HIPAA? So in that case, there could be a good contract between the two companies. So a contract in which the Indian company agrees to follow the HIPAA for the US company that they work for. Okay, so that is offshoring. Okay, here's a business scenario, and may I request Balaji to read this, please?
Kevin is studying the importance of information security, governance, and management. Governance is associated with providing oversight, enacting policies, establishing accountability, resource planning, and strategic planning. Management, on the other hand, involves implementation, enforcement of policies, handling responsibilities, resource planning, and project planning. Doing the right thing is management. Doing the things right is governance. The question is this a true statement? Is this statement true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Doing the right things, what needs to be done? Is that management? And doing things right, whatever we're doing it correctly, that is governance. Is that correct?
I think it should be the other way around. Governance is something doing things right, and management is doing those things properly.
So yes, this is not a true statement. Doing the right thing. What should we do? What needs to be done? That is usually the governance, and doing those things correctly is your management. All right. So I usually use this. Usually use this statement to define the difference between a manager and a leader. Right. So you say doing the right thing is leadership, and doing things right is what a manager does. So anyway, so I hope you understand this. All right, and there are some layers of responsibilities. Okay, so it talks about a senior manager. So who has the ultimate responsibility for security? Okay, just a quick question. What is the difference between responsibility and accountability? Responsible, accountable.
Accountable is the broader form of being responsible. So responsible is XYZ person is responsible for completing certain tasks. But the person who is accountable for that may or may not be responsible, and he would delegate the responsibilities to other people. But he will still be held accountable for getting those things completed. So that's accountable.
Okay, okay. Yeah, okay, so let's forget that, because in PMP you have this RACI table, so that's where I explained this accountability and responsibility. So yes, so there could be multiple people who are responsible to do a task, right? So, but accountability lies with one person, right? There's one person who's accountable. So which also probably relates to the ultimate responsibility. And then you also can have information security officer who is responsible for security. Data owner, data custodian, which we will discuss this more in detail in the second domain. And we have the other layers like your system owner, security administrator, security analyst, user, auditor. Okay, so you can read through this. You don't have to memorize any of this. All right, this is important. This is to talk about security policies. So policy is an overall broad statement, right? It's produced by the senior management. So this a security policy is a very generic statement, a broad statement which is endorsed by the senior management, and it kind of talks about the role of security within the organization. So some of the characteristics include, right, the security is, like I mentioned, it's going to be generic, okay, very broad statement, and it has to be non-technical. People should be able to understand what it is talking about. Okay, so you cannot use any technical word in a policy. And a policy must integrate security into all business processes. So we must be looking at enterprise end-to-end. The policy must be reviewed regularly, and or as whenever there's a change in the company. So at least once a year is advised. It's advised, and it must support the vision and the mission of the organization. So the policy must be aligned to the vision and the mission. Okay, so that's a security policy, and there are different types of policies. Could be regulatory policies. So regulatory policies are very industry specific, right? So, for example, in medical, you will be you'll have to follow HIPAA. In the online e-commerce, PCI DSS, etc. Advisory. Again, and you have informative policies. So this is some of the different types of policies. So policy document, I'm sure you have seen a policy document before, and there are certain elements of the policy document. One is the purpose. So states like, what is the purpose of this policy? And scope is very important. What is the scope? Does it apply to all the employees or to certain specific employees, or is it certain specific device, or whatever that. The scope has to be absolutely clearly mentioned. Responsibilities, who are going to be responsible to enforce this policy. And compliance, what happens if you don't follow the policy? Okay, so leave policy, for example, if you don't follow the leave policy, maybe you could they could give you leave without pay or something like that. Okay, so you have to ensure that all of these elements are in the policy very well defined for everybody to understand. Now, like I said, mentioned earlier on, the policy is a very high level statement, non-technical. So you need certain other documents to support your policies, and those documents are your standards, guidelines, procedures, and baselines. And look at this chart here. So it makes a lot of sense that the top at the top is the land of the laws, the regulation, and requirements. So this is at the top. So the organization has to follow the regulatory laws. Flowing from that is your general organization policy, and supporting these is your functional policies. Okay, so HR policies, IT policies, admin policies. So these are your various different policies, which is functional based. Now let's understand the various different different standards, guidelines, and procedures and baselines. Okay, so quick question: are policies mandatory? Are policies a mandatory activity?
Absolutely, yes. Policies are a mandatory activity which are required to define what an organization will do, and what does it require the people to do in order to meet a certain objective.
Right. Correct. So your policies are mandatory, right? So in that case, you will find words like you must do this, you will do this, you shall do this. So these are the words that you will see in a policy, right? So it's very important to have policies, but because without policies, then you have individuals will be making decisions about what is right or wrong for the company based upon their personal values. And maybe based on their past experience, right? So it's absolutely important that everybody follows the same standards, the same policy, so that everybody is aligned with the company. Okay, so hence we need to have those policies, and like as mentioned earlier on, the policies it's a mandatory activity. Okay, so having a policy will ensure that that everybody has a common set of expectations, and it also communicates the goals and the objectives of the management. So everybody knows what are they supposed to do as part of the policy. Okay, they need to not share their password, for example, or they need to come to work on time, whatever. All those things are part of the policies. Okay, so are standards mandatory activity?
Not for all organizations. Some organizations are not required to follow any standards.
Okay.
For all those which are required to abide by, it's a mandatory activity.
Okay, that's a very interesting statement that you made. So what you have to understand is that when I say standard, it really does not refer to only the external standard. So while we may be referring to external standards, but the organization may have their own internal standards as well. Okay, so please understand this. Okay, so it could be either the external standard or your own organizational standards. That's perfectly fine. So standards are mandatory activities. So you have to follow these standards. So what are the words you will find again? You will find words like you must do this, you will, or you shall do this. Those are all your mandatory activities. So what do you think is the difference between a policy and a standard?
Standard is something you have to follow, as you just said. Policy, it's kind of a evolving process, and once policy is decided, it will become a standard.
Standard could be a baseline within an organization that you have to do at least this much or higher.
Okay. Anybody else?
Very high level.
What is high level?
Policies.
Okay. And standards?
And standards, as you mentioned, it's a kind of baseline which everybody has to follow.
Basically, policy is kind of it makes sure you have the compliance of certain regulations, what you are going to do, and the compliance, and what is the scope of it, what you are going to do. That is part of policy.
Okay. Okay, so let me read out a statement. All financial transactions must be encrypted. All financial transactions must be encrypted. Is that a policy or a standard?
It's a policy.
Standard.
This is
Standard.
Yes. Okay. Somebody says standard. Somebody says policy. Okay. Okay. Why do you think it's a standard?
It is a must. You have to. There is no other way.
All right. So is that the reason why it's a standard? Which means policy is not a mandatory?
a policy statement would have said that all financial transactions must be secured. Encryption is basically adding one more layer to it, like defining what exactly needs to be done to protect the financial transactions.
Standard is something
Standard
which is more
because
specific.
it is referring to mandatory activity and resulting in a specific action like secure. It should be secure because it may be owing to some law or some regulation whatsoever. To comply with that regulation or rule, you are taking a mandatory action that you are securing the financial transaction, and it's a mandatory activity. That's why it's a standard. Versus policy is an overarching umbrella that may have hundreds of standards, such standards like that, many baselines or whatever. Like it's a policy is an overarching umbrella that will define many hundreds laws, regulations, and then the organization policy, then the security policy for that, legal policy for that, and in turn it will comply with one small standard and 100 other standards and guidelines and procedures and baselines.
Shankar?
Hi, Shankar here. As from my side, standard is a it's like a network. You know the OSS standard, right, in the network. So every company will follow the standard. If they require, they can put a policy for that standard.
Okay, so let me read out another statement. It says all financial transactions must be encrypted using AES 128-bit. Okay, so let me repeat one more time. So you have to sometimes you have to unlearn some of the things, right? So standards can be external. Okay, so like for example, AES is an external standard. ISO, those are external standards. But you can also have your internal standards. All right, please understand. You can have your internal standards. So, for example, my logo size will be this particular size. My font will be this particular standard we will use. So you can have internal standards as well. So please don't think that all standards have to be is worldwide. Everybody uses the same standard. Not necessarily. Okay, so yes, the question was all financial transactions to be encrypted using AES 128-bit.
I think that will be the policy. Having the financial statements encrypted is a policy, and how you are going to encrypt, what is encrypted process, or what you have defined as IES. The number whatever you mentioned, that is going to be the standard. You cannot go below the standard encryption level. That is a standard.
Okay.
And having the financial statements encrypted, that is a company policy.
Okay, so let's hear it from Gomit. Gomit?
Yeah, so this is absolutely a standard statement because it is defining a baseline that you have to do this much. A policy statement could have been that financial transactions have to be secured / encrypted. Now that the question is changed, so I'm thinking that you would want to say that all transactions need to be encrypted because again secured is a very high level statement. But when you set a bar, that a measurable bar that 128-bit AES encryption has to be followed, that's a standardization process.
Right. So yeah. Okay, so you have to understand, guys. First of all, that policy is a high-level standard, high-level statement, and yeah, going back to this statement, it says it must be generic, it must be non-technical. People should understand what it means. All right, so so if I mention AES 128-bit, that is being very specific. All right, that's being very specific. And that is a standard. All right. So when I say all financial transactions must be encrypted using AES 128-bit, then that becomes a standard. Okay. So the other concept is that of a guideline. So guidelines are your optional action that one can take. So it's not mandatory. So in this case,
sorry to interrupt, Naga.
yeah,
So
yeah,
just going back to your earlier question, the statement that every financial transaction should be encrypted.
or secured. Yes, that's a policy. I think the better word would have been, yes, somebody mentioned it should have been a secured rather than encryption. Yes, I agree.
Right.
So
Okay.
that,
So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I just want.
Yeah. So that's a policy. So in this case, in the guideline, so since this is not mandatory, so I will use words like you should do this, you may do this, or you can do this. I've seen a lot of policy documents which write you should do this or you should do that. Okay, so that is not really referring to a mandatory activity. Okay, because should is sort of giving an option whether you should do that or you shouldn't do that. So ensure that policies do not have the word should. You should have words like must, will, and shall. So guidelines, like I mentioned, it's not mandatory. So actually, you will have words like should, may, or can. And the other one is the procedure. So you'll have procedures which are your step-by-step tasks, which will kind of tell you how to achieve a certain objective. So for example, how to install a router. Okay, so you'll say step 1, you will switch on the router. Step 2, you'll connect it to a computer. Step 3, you will type this command and things like that. So that is a step-by-step process, which is a procedure. It's a really long and detailed document. Okay, so you have the policy, like I mentioned, your policy and supporting the policies are your standards, guidelines, and your procedures. Now let's quickly do a so I'm going to read out and I'm going to paste it here as well, a statement, and you have to figure out whether that's a policy or a standard or a guideline or a procedure. Okay, so I'm just going to share it with you all. So it says, all boards must be nailed together using company-issued hammers to ensure end product consistency and worker safety. So what do you think this is? Okay, so why do you think it's a guideline?
Because it says should be.
It just says should be. I can't see should be here.
Because must, you said must be, right?
No, I have you can check the chat window. I pasted the statement in the chat window.
Okay.
All boards must be nailed together using company-issued hammers to ensure end product consistency and worker safety.
In that case, it's a standard.
It's a policy statement.
Gomit, why do you think it's a policy statement?
There could be many more details which can be further added, like what is the standard of hammer, nail, all those things. It doesn't really specify a lot of things. It just says that these things must be done for so and so objective. So it defines an objective also, why we want to do a particular thing. But then it stays there. It doesn't really go down to defining what is the standard methodology of achieving something. That's why I think it's a policy.
Okay, Shrikant, what do you think it is?
I think this is standard.
Okay, why do you think it's a standard?
Because it was specifically mentioned it should be used with company. Sorry, I just want to read the statement again. The boards must be nailed together using company-issued hammers. So it was specifying something. So I think it's a standard.
Okay. Okay, Naga, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it's again a policy because there are no technical details involved. It just provides a broader guideline that the boards have to be nailed together. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a policy.
Okay. Runal, what do you think?
Hello.
Hello. Yes, Runal, I can hear you.
Yeah, because sir, actually the company is sharing, or we can say communicating to the employees that ensure the end product consistency about nail types and all. That's why.
So what do you think the answer is?
Policy, sir.
Policy. Okay. 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 So I'll reserve my answer for this. We'll come back and you tell me the answer later on. Okay. So let's look at another statement here. Let me copy paste it for all. And the statement is, to avoid splitting the wood, a pilot hole may be drilled first.
Guideline.
Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's use the chat window, and you can mark it to the presenter and write your answer. So what is it a guideline or policy, standard, whatever, procedure? So let's see. So please mark it to only the presenter. Yeah. Okay, Ram. Okay, your mic is not working. Okay, perfect. Okay, that's fine. Then let me speak to somebody else. Let's speak to Balaji. Balaji, what do you think the answer is?
I think it's a procedure.
Okay, why do you think it's a procedure?
Because it says it's kind of a it's a task to make it to achieve the security of the board, so that nobody is hurt. So he is telling you to drill a hole, and then that is your task number 1, and then you continue to make it a permanent fix. So I believe it is a procedure.
Okay. Okay. Alan, what do you think the answer is?
I think it's a guideline because it says you can use a pilot hole may be drilled. I mean, you can use a banana, but you can use a pilot hole. But it's just an option. It's optional, and it's not mandatory.
It's optional. It's not mandatory, and that is a guideline. Absolutely correct. So, okay, so this is a guideline, guys. Okay, let's look at another statement here. Let me just paste it here, and again, let's use the chat window to answer, and please mark it to only the participant, sorry, to the presenter. And the statement says, 1, position nail in upright position on board. 2, strike nail with full swing of hammer. 3, repeat until nail is flush with board. Shankar, are you there?
Yep.
Shankar, what do you think the answer is?
It's a guideline and the procedure.
No, this is one answer.
One answer. Okay. Guideline.
Okay. Why do you think it's a guideline?
Because it's giving an instruction to do work by.
So it's giving you instruction. So you think this is a okay? This is a guideline. Okay. So okay, fair enough. Rakesh, what do you think the answer is? Rakesh, is your mic working, Rakesh? Let me unmute you. Rakesh, unmuted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think is the answer?
Okay, by saying the third the line, I say the repeat until nail is flush with board. So the last statement goes to must. So
where is it must? I can't see a must here. Can I see?
A repeat until nail is flush with board.
Okay. Okay.
So some directions which is given specific.
Okay, okay, fair enough. You're saying it's mandatory activity.
Yeah.
And so this is a standard. What is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So okay, let's hear it from Satish. Okay, thank you, Rakesh.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you can mute okay, you can mute yourself, Rakesh. Can you mute?
Yeah.
Yeah, please mute. Okay, thank you, Satish.
I think it's a procedure.
Why do you think it's a procedure?
It's telling the step-by-step process what he has to do.
So what's the definition of a procedure?
Sorry, come again?
Definition of a procedure?
A procedure is explaining the process how to do the task in a step-by-step process.
All right. That's okay. Yeah. So procedure is defined as a step-by-step tasks. Right, so I don't see there's any other step-by-step task more clearer than this one. So step 1, position nail. Step 2, strike nail. Step 3, repeat So yeah, those are all mandatory activities. This is how you need to do it. But this is a procedure, right? And let's add another statement. Let's see what the answer is. Okay, here it says 11-inch fiberglass hammers will be used. Only hardened steel nails will be used with the hammers. Automatic hammers are to be used for repetitive jobs only that are more than 1 hour. Shrikant.
I think this is standard.
Why?
As you mentioned, like 11-inch fiberglass hammers will be used, and again, steel nails will be used with hammers. Just specifying something, so I think it's a standard.
Okay. Sitaraman?
Yeah, I think it's a standard because in this scenario the hammers will be used till greater than 1 hour. So I believe it's a standard procedure.
Okay.
He is guiding to someone have to do in the long process for an 1 hour. So it is a standard procedure to do the same procedure while using the 11-inch hammer.
All right. Dheeraj, what do you think the answer is? Dheeraj, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I feel it is standard statement because
Why?
specifically it's very specific. I mean specific about what hammers to be used, and it also says will be used, which makes it mandatory, or which makes it a mandatory statement.
Okay, so I think all of you agree that this is a standard. So yes, everybody is correct. How about this first statement that we talked about? What is this statement?
I think then it becomes a policy.
Why is it a policy?
Because it tells that, it's telling you that the boards, it's kind of a generalized statement saying that the boards should be, nailed together for the safety. It's a kind of a broad statement.
Okay. So yes, guys, you all are correct. This is that's a policy. Okay, that's a policy, and okay, that's a policy, not really a standard. Okay, we're not very specific. The standard was the one with the 11-inch hammers, which are very specific. Okay, so what we will do now is we'll take a 10-15 minutes break, and in the meantime, we'll do a polling activity. Okay, so I'm just opening the polls, and we'll come back after 10-15 minutes. Please be back on time, and here we go. Please attempt the polls. You have 5 minutes to complete the polling activity. Okay, so now let's continue with the concept of baseline. So in security, baselines are uniform ways of implementing a safeguard. Okay, so an example of a baseline could be harden the system by applying the Center for Internet Security Linux benchmark. Okay, so that is an example. You say system must meet that baseline described by this benchmark, right? But you need to understand that the baselines are discretionary, which means it's perfectly acceptable if you're able to harden the system following another method. Okay, another method as long as it's as secure as a system hardened using those baselines. So those, like I mentioned, this is not really mandatory. It's not really. It's discretionary. So that's baseline. So here is this in a scenario. May I request Dheeraj to read this? Okay, so Dheeraj, just a second. Before we begin, we're going to follow another process to answer this kind of to read this kind of scenarios. So in this case, what we will do, this is an examination technique. So what we will do is we'll read the question first. Okay, we'll try to understand what the question is trying to ask, and while we read the scenario, we will try to filter out the questions. Okay, there's going to be a lot of material in the scenario, so you'll just focus on the right answer. Okay, so it's examination technique. Let's begin.
Kevin was examining a security.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. What we said was we'll read the question first. We'll try to understand the question. Only after which we will read the scenario.
Sure. Question is, which important element of the policy is missing from the list Kevin identified?
Okay. The scenario, please.
Kevin was examining a security policy of Nutri Worldwide that had been introduced at least a decade ago and turned out to have been a bad policy. This policy was withdrawn within a month after its launch. During his examination of the policy, he identified that it covered elements of a good security policy like purpose, objective, responsibility, compliance, and review.
All right. So what is the answer?
Enforcement is something which is missing.
That is compliance, so it's there.
Purpose, responsibility. I think the scope is missing.
Scope is missing. Absolutely correct. So, right, scope is missing. Okay, good, Dheeraj. Thank you. Okay, so let's now talk about compliance. Okay, so it's absolutely important to be compliant. So what is compliance? Compliance means to conform to a rule, or could be a specification, could be a policy, or the law, or the standard, right? So there are different compliance that needs to be depending on the type of business that you are in. So if you're not compliant, then it could lead to fines, penalties, or even imprisonment, right? So you need to be compliant in order to gain your customers' trust, to have a competitive advantage in the market. And we talked about earlier on that one of the ways to be compliant is to ensure that you do regular audits, and the auditing will kind of detect if there are any issues, if there are any gaps, and any abnormal activities, and accordingly ensure that and accordingly figure out where the issues are. So here are some of the guidelines. You can read through this. Some of the things it talks about is having the report every year, and it talks about having a compliance with the risk management policy. So you can read this down. You don't have to memorize any of this. It talks about establishing a policy, standard, guidelines, baselines, etc. And somebody at a higher level manager to oversee compliance. So there are some standards. Again, you don't have to go into details of each one of them. You just need to know the names. Like, for example, COBIT, we discussed earlier on. FISCAM, this is a US standard. GAS, GAO, these are your US standard. And ISO 27000 series, this is a very popular standard to be used throughout the world. Okay, so moving on to another concept. This is about cybercrime. So again, this is from the earlier domain of your laws and regulations. So we have two parts. Again, one part is discussed in this domain. The other part is discussed in the seventh domain. Okay, let me read out the definition for cybercrime. It's a very comprehensive definition. It says offenses that are committed against individuals or groups of individuals with a criminal motive to intentionally harm the reputation of the victim or cause physical or mental harm to the victim, directly or indirectly, using modern telecommunication networks such as the internet, through chat rooms, emails, notice boards, groups, and mobile phones through SMS or MMS. Right. So this is a very comprehensive definition. I think it. So what what are the reasons there is an increase in the computer-related crimes? So some of the possible reasons could be because of connectivity of the internet. So the penetration of internet has happened. There are many more people connected now, and there are the bad ones as well as the good ones, right? And low cost of computational resources. It's really come down. The cost has really come down. The Moore's law is taking place. It's higher. The more powerful computers at lower costs. So my smartphone today, in the it's got an octa-core and some GBs. I don't know how many GBs. It is much more powerful than a laptop that I had 5 years back. That's how it is. The systems are getting smaller, more powerful. People are connected. So there are more possibilities, more possibilities, a more percentage of computer crimes. So there are 3 categories of these computer crimes. First is the computer-assisted crime. Now, and this is where you will use the computer to carry out the crime. So in this case, the computer is a tool. Okay, so you could do some kind of a fraud. You could do some kind of counterfeit, theft, etc. And the other is the computer as the target. So in this case, the computer becomes the victim. Right, so the computer, there could be a denial of service. You could send some virus, or you can hack the computer. And the third category is computer incidental to the crime. So in this case, the computers, so the crime would have occurred irrespective of the computer being there or not. Okay, so it just happened that the computer just happened to be there when the crime occurred. Okay, so it's not really related to the crime. So example given here is a list of customers for traffickers. So if that list is in the computer, that doesn't really mean that the drug traffickers wouldn't have carried out their dirty job. They would have done it in any case. It just so happened that the list was in the computer. So computer incidental to the crime. Right? So make note: computer-assisted crime, computer as the target, and computer incidental to the crime. Here is a business scenario, and may I request Gomit to read this, please?
Sure. So first I read the question then?
Yes.
What type of computer crime is referred to in the scenario? Towards the end of the last year, many users at Nutri Worldwide Incorporated reported unusual activities on the systems. The IT security team had identified that some cyber criminals had targeted Skype, Facebook, and Windows users on the organization computers by using multiple black hole activities. For completing the attack, the black hole exploits required the users to open links for compromised websites hosting malicious files that will be downloaded and executed. These files contained a JavaScript which infected the machines. Hilda Jacobs, General Manager IT Security, instructed Kevin to scan all the systems for malicious software and block Facebook and Skype on all the corporate machines until further orders.
Yep. So out of these 3 categories, which category are we talking about?
Computer as target.
Computer as the target, absolutely correct. Okay, so we will also discuss about some of the legal systems throughout the world being used today. Again, the idea is that you will not going to be lawyers, but you have to understand the basics of this legal system so that you can assist, you can work with the lawyers. All right, so the common law is very much used in the US, the Canada, the UK, etc. Right? So there are 3 branches to this common law. You have the criminal law, the tort or the civil law, and the administrative or regulatory law. So the criminal law deals with wrongdoing in the society, right? So things like the murder, theft, robbery, all those things come under criminal law, right? So the punishment is usually jail time and probably some fine in this case, right? So criminal, that's dealt with criminal law. The tort law or the civil law that deals with wrongdoing against individuals or companies. So in this case, if you have a wrongdoing against the company, you could go to a civil court. Okay. So usually the fine, there's usually a fine, and you need to pay some penalty, and very rarely does somebody go to jail for this. Okay. Administrative or regulatory law. This is dependent on your the industry that you're in. So, if, for example, if you're in the medical industry in the U.S., you will fall under HIPAA. If you're in the food industry, you're governed by the food regulatory laws. Okay, so the punishment is usually, if you break this law, the punishment is usually a heavy fine. Okay, and it's usually, sometimes could be a huge amount. And so that is the regulatory law, and in some cases could be some kind of a jail time as well. Right. So there are other laws as well. So it depends on these. This is one, the customer and the customary law. This is again based on the region. Okay, so based on certain part of the society, they will have their own system. They will follow their own wisdom, their own traditions and cultures. And punishment could probably be some kind of a fine. Or you could have a religious law. This is influenced by the religion, right? So, for example, you have this Islamic laws, Sharia laws, which are being followed in the Middle East and North Africa, and many countries use the mixed law. Okay, so this is where you have more than one legal system. Okay, for example, India also has a mixed law. Europe, North America, etc. They all have a mixed law. Okay, here's a business.
One question before we proceed first. For the purpose of this exam, are we required to know the basics of law and legal system of US, or
what we studied is not specific to US or anything? We need to understand what criminal law is, tort law, administrative law, all these things. Yeah.
Because tort law is specific to US. Tort law is, and we call
not necessary. Okay. Not necessary. Tort law, civil law, those are all not necessarily only to the US.
Oh, okay. I thought it's after a name of someone. Okay.
Though most of this common law actually began with the US. If you go back to the history, this is where, UK, right? So UK kind of in the United Kingdom, Britain, when they had this common law, and then that's how, and when they started conquering the world, that's where everybody started kind of following there, and this is how. This is very, very commonly used throughout the world: criminal, tort, and administrative law. Okay, here's a business scenario. If Miracles, another, start to read this, please.
So the question is, under which type of law the partner has filed the lawsuit? Scenario goes like this. Kevin Butler was studying the major legal systems which are followed throughout the world. Curiously, he thought of going through the archives of legal cases involving Nutri Worldwide. He came across one of the recent cases where Nutri Worldwide lost a legal battle against one of its partner organizations. The dispute was regarding breach of some clause of the partner agreement. The partner filed a lawsuit against Nutri Worldwide for violation of its rights and claimed a compensation of $2 million. So this comes under the regulatory law.
Right? Is it so? Is there a regulation which?
It could be under civil law.
Sorry, why civil law?
It's not criminal. Because contract is not subject to an establishment of fact that any regulatory or a legal or a judiciary may have established. A contract is between two parties to abide to a particular nature of work, and both the parties are signed to agree to it, so it doesn't fall under any other category anyways. Administrative is more to do with certain standards and certain regulatory requirements that the country sets. So basically, either by elimination or by knowing that this is, this is a a crime against an individual, or rather deviation against an individual, this would form under the civil law.
Right. Wrong against individual or companies, that comes under the civil law. Right. Okay. So thank you. And moving on, this is interesting. These are your intellectual properties laws. Okay. So there are various intellectual properties that is there, and each one is protected differently. So let's understand what they are. So a patent. So a patent will try to protect any invention, okay, but that invention has to kind of meet 3 criteria. And those criteria are that the invention must be novel, which means it has to be new. It must be useful. It has to do something some useful work, and it has to be non-obvious, which means it's okay. Which means like you cannot come up with saying a chair with 4 legs. That is non-obvious, right? So if the new invention, if the invention kind of follows these 3 rules, then the inventor can apply for a patent. And if the patent is successfully granted, then the inventor, the owner, can legally use this patent, and for the period of 20 years. In this period, no one else can use the invention. Okay, and so when the patent is expired, when it expires, the invention then goes to the public domain, and then everyone can use that. Okay, so that is your patent. Anybody knows what's a patent troll? Patent troll. Anybody heard about that term? Nobody? Okay. Okay, so patent troll are those individuals or a company that they either creates an invention or they purchase a patent with the purpose of never wanting to use it again. All right. So what they do is for the purpose of wait for somebody else to use that patent, infringe that patent, and they kind of sue the other person and extract money from them. So kind of an opportunist, I would say. Right, so it's really on a rise as this in the U.S. You have to be really careful when you kind of invent something or use something, so even in the software or the invention, you need to ensure that that's patent free. And recently, I think Apple paid around a couple of $1 million as a patent violation fine to this university. I think I'm not too sure about the details. You can read about that because if that's how it is. At least in India, as far as I know, in India, you need to have a working model in order to file for a patent. So end of every year, one must have a working model. That kind of ensures that there is no patent trolling happening, that you're using the patent for the right purpose. Okay, here Sitaram says, unmute me. Okay, let me unmute him. Hello, Sitaraman?
Yeah, thanks us.
All right. So, yeah, so moving on, the trademark. So trademark kind of protects the brand, okay? So the goodwill of a company. So if the trademark could be a word or a name, symbol, color, sound, product, shape, anything, okay? So for example, let's look at this. So tomorrow, if I want to open a company called let's say Cisco, right? So I will not be allowed to do that, right? So let me just show you. Let's go to the Cisco website. Now let me open this CISSP. Okay, so if you look at this CISSP, there's this big R on top. You know what that means?
Registered
trademark, yes.
Yeah, registered trademark.
Yes, and even this IC square, there's an R here, which is a registered trademark. So which means tomorrow, if I want to open another, if I have another certification or whatever, another a certification course with the name CISSP, I will get into trouble, okay, because that's a registered trademark name, okay. Or if I want to tomorrow, if I want to open a company called Cisco, again I get in trouble. Or if I want to have a logo, a yellow arc which looks like a McDonald's, again I may be sued for that. So those are the trademark which is protecting those brand, right? Copyright. Now copyright generally covers the expression of ideas. It may not be the exact same words. But if it covers if it covers the idea, expression of the idea, then it falls under copyright, right? So copyright will protect your writings, such as your poems, your books, etc., or your recordings, music, movies, or the databases, computer programs. They all come under your copyright. And the duration is a little longer, much longer actually. And it's currently it's 50 years after the creator's death, or 70 years. So it's very interesting. So I will encourage you to read an article. I'll just show you so that you let me see this. This article is about Mickey Mouse. Okay, so it says how Mickey Mouse keeps changing copyright law. I'll just quickly open this. And it's very interesting to know, this is a US standard, so very interesting to know that the copyright laws in the names, it's began in late 17 something, yeah, 70, 80 something. Yeah, so this is when it began as a 1780 somewhere, and this is when the initial law was only for 14 years, okay? And then it kind of over the period of time it has increased, and Mickey Mouse is Walt Disney's most popular character, which was created in 1927, and so Mickey Mouse, when Mickey Mouse was to be expired, then the law changed to 28 years. The next time it was to be changed to be made public, then it became 56 years, and as of today, it's increased so much that the Mickey Mouse will now only expire in 2023, which means once it expires, it's out of the copyright. It's not copyrighted anymore. Then anyone can use that character, right? So it's very interesting. So you could probably read this thing and how the laws have changed over a period of time to protect Mickey Mouse. All right, so that is copyright. Trade secret. Now, what is the formula which Colonel Saunders uses in his KFC sauce? What is the code that Google has for that search engine, right? What is that formula which is used by Coke or Pepsi? Okay, so nobody knows that. Right? If everybody was to know that, then all of these companies would lose their competitiveness. They would not be able to survive. Everybody else would then start making that. So it's vital that this trade secrets be protected, right? And there are laws which will protect it, and that is the trade secret. And so unlike your patent, so there's a difference. If you file a patent, then that patent is publicly known, so everybody knows, everybody gets to see what the patent has been filed for. Okay, it's just that they will not be able to use it. In trade secret, it's slightly different. You don't have to file it. So in trade secret, nobody needs to know. Okay, nobody needs to know. So you don't kind of make it public knowledge. There was a case in late, I think 2007, when some of the employees from Coke, they went to Pepsi and offered to sell them certain documents, and it was found out that those documents were trade secrets. So Pepsi kind of agreed to go for the deal. It was for about a couple of $1 million, and but in the meantime, Pepsi informed the Coke officials, and these employees were caught, apprehended, and I think as of now, some of them are behind the bars. Right, so that's how trade secrets are protected. People can be sent to jail for that. Licenses are again very important. So licenses for software is absolutely important for you to understand. So what should you follow? and the question is whatever the software license tells you to do. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether that's open source or free or paid, whatever, you have to follow what the software license tell you to do. And we'll discuss about this a little more in detail later on. Here is a business scenario, and we request Prativa, if you're there, to read this, please. Prativa, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was reading on mute. Under which type of IP law was the lawsuit filed? Keval Buttrell was studying for intellectual property laws as part of his preparation for CISSP exam. While studying the topic, he remembered a recent case in which his organization had successfully won a lawsuit against a competitor organization. The case in question was regarding the use of Nutri Worldwide Inc.'s product name for a similar kind of its product by the competitor organization. The court gave its verdict in favor of Nutri Worldwide Inc., and the opposite party had to pay heavy fine. So I think it is over the trademark.
Why trademark?
Because it is specific to the company, Nutri Worldwide Inc., and their product name.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Okay.
So, like, you gave the example of McDonald's that yellow art cannot be reused. It's similar thing.
Right. So it's got to do with the infringement of the name. You cannot use the same product name. You cannot have a product named Cisco again, right?
Correct.
So that's a problem. And it is under the trademark. Very, very nice. Okay. Just a quick question. So you must have heard about this patent wars between Samsung and Apple, those legendary wars that happens, right? So they're fighting this war, these battles in the U.S. and maybe in some other countries, and in the U.S. maybe somebody wins, in some other countries somebody wins, and it goes on and on. So why do you think they're fighting all of these battles all over the world? Why not finish up in one place and say, okay, let's finish it up, meet in one place and finish it up? Why do they need to kind of fight it out in every country?
Sir, is that a question for me or for all participants?
Everybody.
Okay.
It's because the patents are filed, they are country specific, and the laws are different in each country. That could be an answer?
Yes, that is an answer, but who's this?
That's Naga.
Naga, yes, absolutely correct. So yes, this is because of the law of the land. So it's different for every country, right? So that's why it's very difficult to kind of have your criminal digital your digital criminals your prosecution for your digital crime. It's very difficult because it depends on the law of the land, and if it's a different country, then you'll have to follow the law of the particular country. Well, this is your business scenario. Let's move on, and let's talk about the concepts of import or export control. This is again when you kind of deal with, especially when you're dealing with selling of softwares and hardwares, and especially with the hardware and software which deal with encryptions, like your firewall or certain things. You need to be aware of these certain restrictions that the UN Council has imposed. So, for example, you cannot sell this security devices to certain countries, like your North Korea or to some of the Middle East countries. All right, so you need to be aware of those things. All right. For this, so the reason that they have been sanctioned is that the ban is so that these devices are not misused. And as I mentioned earlier on, you need to be aware where your data is flowing. So suppose you're using cloud computing, right? in today's world, we are borderless. With the internet, there is no border, right? So, but you need to be careful where your data is being transferred to, and why? Because the law of the land matters. So, if your data is sent to into a country or a place where there is zero privacy, right? That could lead to issues for you, right? So we discussed about privacy. So just mentioned about privacy. So let's talk a little more about privacy. So data privacy is all about how you're going to protect your personal information, and as of today, privacy is a big problem, right? So everybody's collecting data, and one never knows what those data are being used for, right? So it is often said that Google probably knows more about you than your own parents. So that's how powerful this privacy data has become. So in the U.S., so these are very U.S. specific laws we're going to talk about, and which also means that we're not going to be going into the details of it. We just need to understand what is it, and that's all. So we have this Federal Privacy Act of 1974. This is one of the earliest Privacy Act to protect the information about the U.S. citizens. So it defines how the information U.S. citizens can be used, collected, and distributed by the federal government. Okay, so it has certain restrictions in place. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act of 1999, this GLEBA, this relates to some financial institution fraud, and they kind of came up with this act to protect the customers' information. So the GLEBA kind of holds the senior manager, the directors, to responsible if there is any security breach. So they need to take care of the due diligence, and they need to take care of the due care. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. Okay, as I mentioned earlier on, this relates to the healthcare industry, and they are required to protect the PHI, protected health information. So PHI includes about 18 elements like your name, address, date of birth, social security number, phone number, email, etc. So all of this information which can identify you need to be protected. Okay, so there are your administrative controls, your technical controls, and your physical controls to ensure that all of this information are protected. And any breach in this law results in huge penalties. Okay, huge penalties. And there have been many cases where the companies have been asked to pay in millions, and the companies have gone bankrupt. Okay, so it's very steep penalties for non-compliance. Excuse me.
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know if it is strictly related to CISSP security domain, but when there are multinationals operating in the borderless world that you mentioned earlier, but they still have abided by their local land law, how does this regulation come into play? For example, there is a medical devices company in Japan, Fujifilm, and it serves all the U.S. clients, most importantly, all the U.S. medical universities. In that case, those universities will require that medical devices company to be HIPAA compliant. So how does that company becomes HIPAA compliant when their country of origination, where the organization is registered, doesn't even have HIPAA or doesn't acknowledge HIPAA?
Yeah, we talked about this earlier on. So I didn't fully get your question scenario, but I think what you're trying to say is something like the earlier case we discussed about outsourcing, where a company in the U.S. wanted to outsource to a company in India, and in India we don't have any HIPAA, right? So the Indian company, they can agree to follow the HIPAA standard, using some kind of a contract. So that's important, because for the company in the US, if they have to outsource, they have to ensure that the subcontractor is compliant. Okay, so they cannot just they just cannot give it to anybody. They have to ensure that the company is compliant, and only then they can further subcontract or outsource. So did I understand your question carefully? Does it make sense, or was it something else?
Yeah, you answered my question, I think. So they do become HIPAA compliant, but not under HIPAA name, by some NDA name or some different XYZ name, but the regulations are enforced. Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, in the sense, yeah, they can become. They need not be. They did not get a certificate, but they can ensure that those controls required to become a HIPAA compliance are met. That's one way one can ensure that. Right. So there are very specific controls for HIPAA.
Yeah.
Right, so the administrative, security, physical, and your technical, the very specific controls. And if you meet that standard, I think you can become HIPAA compliant. Though you though you may not need to be for your own country, in your own country, just for the sake of the contract, you can become HIPAA compliant. Patriot Act of 2001. Now this is Patriot stands for your Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. Now this Patriot Act came into force after 9/11, and there was a lot of sentiments, I suppose, and the government wanted a lot of power to carry out search, carry out warrants, and to snoop on people. So they came up with this Patriot Act, and so it gave a lot of undue power to the federal agents, right? So this is very much, I think, very similar to POTA Act in India. So if you're aware of POTA, it's very similar to that. In terms of the objectives are very similar. But yes, so this has gone under a lot of criticism, because there was a lot of misuse of this Patriot Act. And as of today, most of the elements of Patriot Act is now is defunct, and maybe just one of few parts of the Act would expire very soon, I suppose. So you can just read about this. All right, so. And as far as privacy is concerned, European Union, EU, they are the ones which I probably hold the highest standard for maintaining privacy. So let's read out some of the principles that they have. So it says the reason must be specified at the time of data collection. The data cannot be used for other purposes. Unnecessary data should not be collected. Only collect the data which is necessary. Data should be kept only for a limited time, after which it should be destroyed. Data should be accessed only by necessary individual. The responsible individual must prevent unintentional leakage of data. Okay, confidentiality. And prohibits transfer of personal data to non-European Union nations that do not meet the privacy protection standards. Now this is a particularly important statement, last statement, which kind of makes it very difficult for non-European Union nation to do business with a European nation country, right? Especially where a lot of personal data transfer is necessary. So at least in the U.S. Department of Commerce, they worked together with the European Commission to develop something called a safe harbor. This is in early 2000s. They came up with this framework. So when this framework was in place, then what it ensured was that that if there was any data transfer requirement, then those approval would either be waived off or approval would be granted automatically. So it was very easy. So all those restrictions, the last line, become redundant in this case, right? And if there were any claims, then against the U.S. organization, that would probably be heard. That would be heard with subject to limit exceptions in the U.S. only. All right. So this made a lot of things easy for them to do business. But as of 6th October 2015, okay, so this is just information for you, okay, not important from the examination point of view. So as of October 5th, 2015, this safe harbor has been declared as invalid by the Chief Justice of the European Union. Okay, so the safe harbor is no longer in place. So immediately after that, the U.S. government again started working on another framework, and the new framework is called the Privacy Shield, and I think it's in force now. We can read about that. You can do a little Google research, and from February this year, 2016, that is in place. Okay. Otherwise, there was a lot of problem again for companies like Google or Facebook that transfer a lot of data. All right, so in this case, Google and Facebook have to exclusively ask for permission to transfer data. Okay, so that is safe harbor. Now any questions so far, guys?
Sir, this is Diligence.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Diligence, yes.
I just want to understand. I mean, we spoke about all these laws. There's some various laws, and at some point of view, are we supposed to memorize all of these?
I mentioned this, that this is US specific laws. The details are not required. So what you only need to understand is, or remember, is the name, and what we just discussed. This 2-3 liners are more than enough. All right, so just understand what it is. So if you kind of come across HIPAA, then you should know, okay, this is Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act, and it is for health industry, and it's for the protection of personal health information, and a few more things. That's all. Okay, you don't have to go into understanding how many controls are there, which are the EPIs that you need to protect. There are 18 of them, so you don't need to know which are the ones. We don't go into that detail. So it's just a 1 inch deep, like I mentioned earlier on.
Right.
Yes.
I would want to emphasize on why CISSP has to speak only on the US or Europe, okay. Why not Asia or Australia?
It's a good question. So the CISSP began as a US, it's a US-based organization, IC². So it was mostly focused on the US laws earlier on. So what I believe is that the earlier CISSP exams were very heavily on the US laws, and as CISSP became more globally accepted, so they have cut down on the question or the focus on the US laws, US specific laws. Right. So as of today, so you will find a lot of reference to the US laws, and you will probably need to know some of them. But fortunately, we don't have to go into the details of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys? Rakesh says learning HIPAA and certification needs to be done for the company and people. So I didn't understand. Okay. Rakesh, were you trying to say something? I didn't understand. Would you like to repeat that?
Yeah. I was just explaining. Just came the thoughts in my mind, and I was explaining the questions which was raised earlier. If something regarding the HIPAA need to be followed by the other countries or other companies where that is already not in place, then the solutions is that HIPAA need to be learned and trained, or company have to encourage the people
compliant.
to learn HIPAA compliant.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rakesh. Okay, so let me tell you a story. So this is a house in the mountain. All right, and in the mountain there's really strong winds that blow. Okay, so I love the mountains. I'm from the mountain, And so I know there's a lot of strong winds that blow here. And unfortunately for this house, the roof is very weak. Okay, the roof is weak. There's this possibility of heavy rainfall and heavy strong winds that blows, and the possibility is that this particular roof gets blown off, and our poor friend Bob is here, and it may land on Bob, injuring him. In fact, actually, there are many cases where people actually die because of roof that fall on them, on top of them. So in this case, Bob could get injured, and probably the rain will fall inside the house and will damage 50% of the goods that's kept inside. Okay, so that's the story. Okay, now let's understand from the risk management point of view certain definitions. So in this case, what do you think is the asset? Yes, Satish.
Dheeraj.
Okay, Dheeraj, yes.
Bob as well as the house.
Okay, Satish.
Yes, it's the same thing, like house and the Bob.
Okay. Okay. So, and what is the vulnerability? What is the threat agent?
Wind and rain.
Rain, strong rain blowing, yes, and falling as well. Those are the threat agents. What is the threat? What will this threat agents do?
Injure Bob.
No, that's the effect of that threat.
The roof may fall. The roof may fall off, and then.
Yeah, so they may blow off the roof.
Yeah, blow off the roof. Yeah.
Yeah. So the strong winds may blow off the roof. So what is the risk? Which means what will happen if the roof is blown off?
Injure Bob.
It may injure Bob, or
yes.
Or destroy the property within the house.
House, yes, the house may destroy.
Yeah. So the rain falling inside the house may destruct some of the things kept inside. 50% of the goods kept inside may get damaged. All right. So those are the scenarios. So what do you think is the countermeasure?
Fix the roof.
Fix the roof. Yes. Fix the roof. Make it more strong. Could be a countermeasure. Or change the roof. Or maybe maybe keep some kind of a some kind of a wall here so that there's no wind blowing. Anyway, so those are some of the options here, and so that is the definition, right? It's very simple to understand, right? Assets, vulnerabilities, threats, etc. So we will talk about that with examples as we get into the risk management. So what is risk management? So risk management is all about identifying your assets, your critical assets, identifying the vulnerabilities in those assets, and mitigating those risks to an acceptable level. Okay, to whatever that acceptable level is. Okay, so everybody agrees like, okay, I'm okay with this particular level, and they kind of maintain it at that level. Here is a business scenario, and Rakesh, may I request to read this, please? Rakesh, are you there?
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The question is, what will the risk management process achieve? While studying the information risk management process, Kevin made notes on the security definition based on example from his day-to-day work as follow: asset, server and system of company, vulnerability, weak rule in firewall, threat, hacking network server, threat agent, hacker, risk, loss of critical organization data, exposure, 25% loss of data which is unencrypted.
Right. So what is the answer?
The reduction in risk of loss of data by strengthening the firewall rules?
It's a very generic question which is asking what will the risk management process achieve?
Risk identification, it will identify risk.
And?
Risk identification or mitigation plan identification.
And mitigate risk to a?
Acceptable level.
To an acceptable level, right. So you see this particular question, so let's look at, so this particular question, did the scenario have anything to do with the question? Could you have answered the question without the scenario?
General, whatever is a good risk management process should achieve, that is our answer. So this scenario is just providing us, that they are the context for this question. But regardless, even without this scenario, the standard answer would remain the same. That is what any good risk management process should achieve.
Right. So so in this case, this particular scenario probably didn't contribute much to the answer, right? So this can happen in the CISSP. That's what I kind of ask you to read the question first. There may be a lot of things. A business scenario is what they throw is. So what I was saying was some of the scenarios, there could be a lot of unrelated information that could be thrown in. So it's also called red herring. You have to be careful about that. That's what I kind of ask you to read the question first. Try to understand what it's asking and filter out all the irrelevant points from the business scenario. But this is a good scenario. It says, so assets are the servers in the system of the company. The vulnerability. So what is the weakness? There's a weak rule in the firewall. So what are the threat agents? What the hackers? What will they do? The threat. So they might hack the network servers. So what is the risk? What will happen if they carry out the threat? Then the organization can lose some critical data. And the exposure, how much do we lose? And it could be 25% of data which was not encrypted. Right, so this is a good example here. And let us.
Saz, I'm sorry. This is Dheeraj here again. Can we go back to the scenario? I really do not understand. I mean, we are identifying the risk in that scenario, but then where are we defining? How do we? Instead of there's no controls defined, right? I mean, how do we come to a conclusion that it is accepted? The risk is in an accepted level. It's nowhere.
We'll do that. We will do that. We will understand countermeasures. The next step is to.
No, I was only speaking about the scenario. This particular scenario, there's no mention of the acceptable level there. I mean, we're just identifying the risk, which says exposure is 25%. Where does it say that the identify risk to an acceptable level? That we have done. We haven't done in that scenario, correct?
We haven't done
identified the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. We have identified that. The next step now is to provide the countermeasures and then do the business and. Yeah.
Correct. So the answer should only be help maintain the should be only identified risk, right? It should not be maintain the identified risk to an acceptable level.
No. So this question is asking about risk management process. What is the purpose of risk management? It is to identify the risk and mitigate it to an acceptable level. Now, in this business scenario, we haven't done that yet. We just figured out what the risk is. Okay, but that has got nothing to do with the concept of risk management.
No, it is not. I understand that, but then this particular scenario, what does it say is what will the risk management process achieve? That would be a general definition for a risk management process.
Exactly, that is the question. Yes, this is a very generic. Like I mentioned earlier on, this scenario doesn't have much to do with the answer. Yeah, this is a very generic question, and the scenario was just thrown into to kind of but it was just thrown in there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So so the next so we need to do a risk analysis. Okay. So the idea is to calculate the probability and the consequence of each known risks, and let's see what we're going to do for that. And the goals are to identify the organizational assets and their values. So assets can be both tangible as well as intangible. What does that mean? What does tangible and intangible mean?
What you can touch and what you can't touch. Tangible is something you can touch and see. Tangible meaning you can't touch and see, but you know it exists. Examples could be asset. A building is an asset. Intellectual property is also an asset. You can't touch and feel, but it's an intangible asset.
Right. So tangible is something which has a physical form, which you can touch and feel, and intangible it's obviously doesn't exist in a physical form, and you cannot touch and feel. So yes, so your software, so that is intangible. You really can't see, right? Your customers' trust, your brand value, those are all your intangible assets, right? So we need to identify those. And when I say assets, so you got to look at both tangible as well as intangible. Okay, so for example, you may let's say what is the value of your CRM, and you will say, okay, I paid X amount for the server hardware. Okay, fair enough. So, but what about intangible? So intangible, I paid Y amount for the software, and I have my customers' data in that for 10 years. Customers' data is there. So what is that value? You can always calculate that value, and using various factors like how much would you lose if you didn't have a CRM, or how much is your competitor willing to pay for that customer's data, and various things. All right, so that's one part. To balance the cost of countermeasures and the impact of the threat. The other goal is to measure probability and impact of latent threats. Latents are hidden threats, and obviously you will identify the vulnerabilities and the threats. So you can have a risk analysis team. Again, this needs to be certain specialized people who knows how to do the risk analysis. So to begin with, you will figure out which are your assets and the values of those assets. And when I say value, it's both the tangible as well as the intangible. And you will do the risk analysis. You will figure out what are the vulnerabilities, and accordingly you will do the assessment. And the third goal is where you find a countermeasure and then implement it. And as I mentioned earlier on, when you're assigning assets values to the assets, there are multiple factors you can look into, like cost to acquire or develop the assets, cost to maintain and protect the assets, value of the assets to owners and the users, price others are willing to pay for the assets, okay, usefulness and role of the asset in the organization. So many things you need to consider. And to do a risk analysis, there are two major approaches one can take. The first is the quantitative analysis. And when I say quantitative, it relates to quantity. Okay, so quantity, and then we have monetary figures, and then you will kind of have you will have numbers and figures, and you can do a very very objective. You can take an objective decision. Whereas in qualitative, we do not have any numbers. Okay, so this is based on a situation, on a scenario, and very subjective. Okay, so we're gonna look at some of the examples for this. And for CISSP, you will need to do some quantitative analysis, and there are a few formulas that you will need to understand and apply. So one of the formula that you need to know, it's called the single loss expectancy. And the meaning for this SLE is how much will the organization lose from a single threat. Okay, so in the earlier case, if the roof was blown away, how much damage would the asset face? So the value for that is the asset value into the exposure factor, right? So let's look at an example here. It says a fire destroys a server with the data encrypted. Consider the following condition. The asset value is 6,000 and the exposure factor is 50%, which means 50% of the data would be lost or damaged. So single loss. So how much would you lose in one incident? So that is, if it was to happen once, it's the asset value into the exposure factor. So the Asset value 6,000, and we lose 50% of that, which is 3,000. So we lose $3,000 from a single incident. Right? That's a single loss expectancy. So next is the ALE that we need to calculate, and ALE stands for your annualized loss expectancy, and this is the financial loss in a single year from that particular threat. And for that we need to calculate the SLE into ARO. SLE we have already calculated. ARO is a annualized rate of occurrence. So this is the we figure out how many times does this threat occur within 1 year. Does it happen every year, or twice a year, or maybe more than once in 10 years? So depending on that, the ARO value would be different. So it's very simple. So it says, so an ALE, so in this case, it says the ARO, annual rate of occurrence, is 10% chances of fire in 1 year. Okay, so it's very little chance, only 10%. So according to this, the ALE would be 3,000 into 10%, which is $300. So you'd be losing $300 every year because of this threat. And the other part is the qualitative, as I mentioned earlier on. So qualitative, there are no numbers. So what you need to look at is the probability and the impact. So let's look at this here. The threat is a fire. The probability of the threat is low, whereas the impact is high. So if the the chances of the fire happening is low, but the impact when if the fire happens, then you could lose a lot of business. Okay, so the theft, the probability is medium, which means that it could happen more often than the fire, and the impact is again high. So this is how you calculate. You don't have specific quantity mentioned here, and this figures of low, high, medium, high. These are based on your judgment, or the best practices, or the intuition and experiences. Okay, all of this are subjective in nature. So there are many ways you can gather data for this. So there are the methods like a Delphi. We'll talk about that. You can have focus groups, surveys, questionnaires, interviews. So Delphi technique is a very popular technique used in a lot of scenarios. And this is one of the best thing about this Delphi technique is that the participants of this they're all anonymous. So they don't know who else is participating in the group, and that helps them to provide an honest opinion without anybody looking down on them. Okay, so in this case, Delphi, what happens is there is a central coordinator, central person who coordinates with all of these various participants, and all these participants they do not know each other. When they're anonymous, they kind of don't know who all are participating, and then in a manner they kind of directly interact with the coordinator, and they can give their honest opinion. Quantitative versus qualitative. So let's understand the difference. Very important. So so it says here, quantitative, it requires complex calculations, right? Whereas in qualitative, there's a high degree of guesswork. So quantitative, it provides you credible cost-benefit analysis. You can take a decision based on that figure. Whereas in qualitative, it is based on the opinions of the individuals who know the process well. In quantitative, you get to see clear-cut losses that can be accrued within 1 year. So in all, quantitative is a much better solution, much better method. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Okay, so let's go back. So what I'll do is I'll open the community.simplilearn.com. I talked about this earlier on. Are you able to see my browser?
Yes.
I scroll down and come to this Simply Talk Online Classroom and On-Demand Forum. So I click on this. You can do the same, guys. Scroll down, Put the CISSP, and here is the question. Consideration for which type of risk assessment to perform includes which of the following? So read the question and answer it.
Could be 3.
So let's understand the question. Can anybody explain the question?
I think it would be 4. The ask is that under what circumstances should we choose qualitative or quantitative risk assessment methodology? So what would be the criteria for selection of the risk assessment methodology?
Very good. The question is correct now. Let's understand what are the factors you will consider.
So for
I think it would be 4th one.
Why?
We will have to understand. First thing is that we need to have people to be able to do it. So capabilities are required, and then culture of organization is important. So I'm going by elimination because these two only occur in one of the answers. And we need budget, of course, for being able to perform a quantitative analysis, because it requires a lot of number crunching, tools, techniques. So these are the reasons why I think so.
Organization is also important, because if the culture of the organization, for example, if the organization is bad, the finance is a finance organization that requires more analysis, and if it is healthcare industry, it requires one more type of analysis. So that's the culture of the organization is also most important.
Yes.
So I go by 4th for quantitative.
Okay. Anybody else a different answer? Or the same answer? So I heard 2 people saying okay to this 4th answer. Well, how about the others? So let's look at the 4th answer. It says culture of the organization. Right. So the culture of the organization says it's a very high risk organization, and they said we cannot take a risk assessment based on the qualitative, because I can't take a decision based on the qualitative analysis. So what option do you have? Okay. And the other question is budget. So I don't have much budget to do this analysis. So what do you do? Go for which type of analysis?
Qualitative.
All right. And your boss tells you, okay, give me a risk analysis in the next 2 hours. Get a risk analysis done in the next 2 hours.
That should be qualitative.
Qualitative again. Well, if you have, okay, so suppose you have, you have tons of money, you have tons of time, but if you do not have the people to do that, because you need expert to crunch those numbers. So what do you do then? Again, go for qualitative, right?
Yeah, again, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, so there's some of the factors. I think 4th is correct. Okay, so this is the Simply Talk, and as I have shown you, there are some questions here, and I request all of you to attempt this question. These are very good questions, specifically chosen handpicked by me, so that you all can attempt this. Okay, so the answers are also here. Let me just, answers is the answers all domains, and you could go through this and try to match your answers. Okay, so this is your Simply Talk. Now we'll stop here for the day. This is slide number 72, and we'll continue from here tomorrow.